Bismillahi ar-Rahmani ar-Rahim. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. Peace be upon you, dear seeker of knowledge. Welcome to this journey through two of the most powerful and protective surahs in the noble Qur'an. As you settle into this moment, take a deep breath. Release the tensions of your day. Allow your heart to become receptive. Before we begin, love to know where are you tuning in from tonight. Share it in the comments below, and let's see how beautifully far and wide the words of the Qur'an travel. Your mind to become present, and your soul to prepare for divine guidance. In these next 2 hours, we will explore together the final 2 surahs of the Qur'an, Surah Al-Falaq and Surah An-Nas, known collectively as Al-Muawwidhatayn, the 2 surahs of refuge. They serve as a divine shield against the unseen forces that seek to harm us, the whispers that disturb our peace, and the darkness that threatens our light. Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, would recite these surahs every morning and evening, seeking Allah's protection from all forms of evil, visible and invisible, internal and external, physical and spiritual. He taught us that in these brief but profound verses lies a fortress of faith, a sanctuary of the soul. Before we begin our detailed study, let us understand what it means to seek refuge in Allah. The Arabic word awadu carries within it layers of meaning. It is not merely to hide or to escape. It is to consciously, intentionally, and wholeheartedly place yourself under the protection of the one who has power over all things. It is to acknowledge your vulnerability while simultaneously recognizing his absolute strength. Think of a child who runs to their parent when frightened. The child does not merely stand near the parent, they embrace them, they hold on, they trust completely. This is the essence of seeking refuge in Allah. It is an act of profound trust, of complete surrender, of unwavering faith. These 2 surahs teach us something essential about our existence. We are not meant to face the struggles of life alone. We are not expected to battle every darkness with our limited strength. Allah, in His infinite mercy, has given us these words as keys to unlock His divine protection. Surah Al-Falaq, which translates to the daybreak or the dawn, opens with seeking refuge in the Lord of the breaking light. Just as dawn breaks through the darkest part of night, Allah's protection breaks through every form of harm that threatens us. The imagery is powerful. No matter how deep the darkness, no matter how long the night, dawn always comes, and with it comes safety, clarity, and renewal. Surah An-Nas, meaning mankind, takes us deeper into understanding the specific threat of whispered evil, those subtle suggestions that enter our hearts and minds seeking to lead us astray. It addresses the universal human struggle against doubt, temptation, and the internal whispers that can be more dangerous than any external enemy. In this peaceful study session, we will explore the precise meanings of each word in these blessed surahs, understanding how the Arabic language carries depths that translations can only approximate. We will discover why Allah chose specific words and not others, and what each choice reveals about His wisdom. The historical context of these revelations, when they were revealed, why they were revealed, and how the early Muslims understood and applied them. We will learn from the Prophet's own practice and the wisdom of the righteous predecessors, the spiritual dimensions of seeking protection, not just from external harm, but from the subtle diseases of the heart, envy, arrogance, despair, and the constant whispers of Shaitan that seek to distance us from our Creator. The practical applications for our modern lives, how these timeless teachings address contemporary anxieties, digital age distractions, and the unique challenges we face in maintaining our faith in today's world. As we embark on this journey together, let us set our intentions. We are not here merely to acquire information, but to seek transformation. These are not just words to be studied, they are divine speech to be internalized, understood, and lived. Take a moment now to make an intention. Say silently in your heart, Ya Allah, open my heart to understand your words. Grant me the wisdom to comprehend what you wish to teach me. Make this knowledge a source of guidance, protection, and closeness to you. Remember, the Qur'an was revealed to be lived, not just recited. As we study these surahs, think about how they apply to your own life, your own struggles, your own journey toward Allah. The companions of the Prophet would say that they learned 10 verses, understood them, and applied them before moving to the next 10. Let us embody this wisdom. In the sacred words that follow, you will find healing for the anxious heart, strength for the weary soul, and light for the confused mind. You will discover that true protection comes not from running away from our fears but from running toward Allah. Let us now begin our journey with full presence, open hearts, and sincere intentions. May Allah accept this effort, illuminate our understanding, and make these surahs a source of protection and blessing in our lives. A'udhu billahi minash shaitani rajim. I seek refuge in Allah from Shaitan, the accursed. Before we recite and contemplate the actual words of Surah Al-Falaq and Surah An-Nas, we must first understand the foundation upon which these surahs are built. Every surah in the Qur'an begins with Bismillah, in the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. But what does it truly mean to begin in Allah's name? When we say Bismillah, we are not merely uttering a formula. We are invoking the essence of the divine, calling upon His attributes, and placing our actions under His authority and blessing. The name Allah itself is the greatest of all names, the name that encompasses all other divine attributes. It is the name that brings comfort to the troubled heart, strength to the weak, and guidance to the lost. Ar-Rahman, the most gracious. This attribute speaks to Allah's boundless mercy that extends to all of creation, believer and disbeliever alike. The sun rises for everyone, the rain falls upon all lands, and sustenance reaches every living creature. This is the mercy of Ar-Rahman, vast and all-encompassing, asking nothing in return. Ar-Rahman, the most merciful. This mercy is particular, specific, and eternal. It is the mercy reserved for those who turn to Allah, who seek His forgiveness, who strive in His path. While Ar-Rahman's mercy touches us in this temporary world, Ar-Rahman's mercy awaits us in the everlasting realm. It is the mercy that forgives our sins, accepts our repentance, and ultimately grants us entrance to Jannah. These two attributes frame our understanding of protection. We seek refuge not from a distant, harsh deity, but from Ar-Rahman, the one whose very nature is mercy upon mercy. Our seeking refuge is met with divine compassion. Our vulnerability is embraced with divine tenderness. The act of seeking refuge is deeply rooted in Islamic tradition and human nature itself. Throughout the Qur'an, Allah commands us to seek refuge in Him from various evils. When you recite the Qur'an, seek refuge in Allah from Shaitan, the accursed. He instructs us in Surah An-Nas. This is not a suggestion but a divine directive, a key to unlocking the full benefit and protection of His words. Consider the wisdom in this. Allah could have simply protected us without our asking. His power is absolute, His knowledge complete, yet He commands us to actively seek refuge, to consciously turn to Him, to verbally express our need for His protection. Why? Because in seeking refuge we acknowledge our complete dependence on Allah. We recognize that we are not self-sufficient, that our strength is limited, that without His protection we are utterly vulnerable. This acknowledgement is itself a form of worship, a manifestation of Tawheed, the oneness and uniqueness of Allah. We declare through our seeking that there is no protector but Him, no refuge but in Him, no safety except through Him. The Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, was the most protected of all creation. He was under Allah's special care, guided by revelation, surrounded by angels. Yet he too sought refuge in Allah regularly, teaching us that no matter our status, our knowledge or our piety, we always need Allah's protection. If the best of creation needed to seek refuge, how much more do we? Al-Mu'awwidatayn, the two surahs of seeking refuge, were revealed together, paired in purpose and power. They are like two wings that allow the believer to soar above the dangers of this world and the next. They are like two shields that protect from opposite directions, one addressing external evils, the other addressing internal whispers. Surah Al-Falaq focuses on tangible and mystical harms, the evil of created things, the darkness of night, harmful magic, and destructive envy. It teaches us that protection from Allah covers every realm of existence. The physical world we see, the unseen world of jinn and spirits, the psychological realm of human emotion, and the spiritual dimension of harmful intentions. Surah An-Nas complements this by addressing the most insidious form of evil, the whisper of shaitan that penetrates the human heart. While Al-Falaq protects us from external threats, An-Nas shields us from the internal enemy, the thoughts, doubts and temptations that arise within our own breasts. Together they form a complete system of protection. The scholars of Tafsir note that these surahs were among the last revelations to the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. As his mission was nearing completion, as the message of Islam was being perfected, Allah gave the Ummah these final tools of protection. It was as if the Merciful was saying, I have given you guidance, now take these shields to protect that guidance. I have illuminated your path, now take these weapons against the darkness that seeks to obscure it. When we recite these surahs, we are not merely repeating words, we are activating a divine mechanism of protection. We are wrapping ourselves in a cloak woven from the speech of Allah Himself. Every letter carries barakah, every word contains power, every verse builds a fortress around our faith. Let us now prepare to enter deeply into the first of these blessed surahs, Surah Al-Falaq, understanding that what we are about to study is not mere poetry or ancient wisdom, but living divine speech that has protected believers for over 14 centuries and will continue to do so until the end of time. Now we arrive at the heart of Surah Al-Falaq itself. Let us first hear the complete surah in Arabic transliteration, allowing its rhythm and melody to settle into our hearts before we dissect its meanings. Qul a'udhu birabbi al-falaq, min sharri ma khalaq, wa min sharri ghasikin idha waskab, wa min sharri an-nafa, thati fil uqad, wa min sharri hasidin idha hasad. Say, I seek refuge in the Lord of the daybreak, from the evil of what He has created, and from the evil of darkness when it settles, and from the evil of those who blow on knots, and from the evil of an envier when he envies. These 5 ayat contain within them a universe of meaning, a comprehensive system of protection, and layers of wisdom that scholars have contemplated for centuries. Let us now begin to unpack the treasures contained in each phrase. The surah opens with a divine command, Qul, say. This single word establishes several crucial realities. First, it reminds us that these are not the words of Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, speaking from his own wisdom. Rather, Allah is commanding him to say these words, and through him, commanding all believers until the end of time, to say them as well. Qul makes these words personal. Allah could have simply stated one should seek refuge, or it is good to seek refuge. Instead, He commands us to say it ourselves, in first person, making it an active declaration from our own tongues. There is power in verbalization. When we speak words of refuge, We are programming our consciousness, aligning our intention, and manifesting our faith through sound and breath. Here we encounter the specific form of refuge, not just I seek refuge in Allah, though that would be sufficient, but I seek refuge in the Lord of Al-Falaq, the Lord of the daybreak, the splitting, the dawn. Al-Falaq comes from the root word falaqa, meaning to split or break open. It refers to that magnificent moment when the darkness of night is split by the first rays of dawn. Think of that experience. You have been in complete darkness, perhaps feeling vulnerable, perhaps anxious, and then gradually, imperceptibly at first, light begins to break through. The darkness does not simply disappear, it is conquered, split apart by the power of light. This is why Allah chose this particular attribute, Rab al-Falaq, to seek refuge in. Just as He splits the darkness with light, He splits our difficulties with relief, our confusion with clarity, our fear with safety. The one who can break open the seal of night and flood the world with dawn is certainly capable of breaking open any darkness that threatens us. Some scholars note that Al-Falaq also refers to Allah's splitting of seeds in the earth to bring forth vegetation, and His splitting of the wombs to bring forth life. Every act of creation is a form of falaq, a breaking open, a bringing forth from concealment to manifestation. The Lord we seek refuge in is the one who brings life from death, light from darkness, existence from non-existence. Now we come to the first category of evil from which we seek protection. Notice the comprehensiveness of this phrase, min sharri ma khalaqa, from the evil of what He has created. Not some created things, not specific threats, but the evil potential in all of creation. This raises a profound theological point. Allah is the creator of all things, and His creation in itself is good. But within creation exists the capacity for harm, for evil, for corruption. A knife is not evil in itself. Min shelf, it can be used to prepare food or to harm another. Fire is not evil. Min shari, it can warm a home or destroy it. Even shaitan was created by Allah, and His creation serves divine wisdom we may not fully comprehend. When we say min sharri ma khalaqa, we are acknowledging that harm can come from any direction, any source. The lion that mauls, the bacteria that infects, the human who betrays, the thought that corrupts, all are part of creation, and all have the potential to harm. This first ayah establishes the broadest possible protection. We seek refuge from every form of evil that exists in the created order. But notice something crucial. We do not seek refuge from creation itself, but from the evil or harm that may come from it. We recognize that creation is fundamentally good, that it serves Allah's purpose, but that we need protection from the harmful aspects that our limited wisdom cannot always avoid or anticipate. This teaches us humility. We cannot predict every danger. We cannot foresee every threat. But we can place ourselves under the protection of the one who knows all, sees all, and has power over all. In this simple phrase lies the key to tranquility. Surrender to Allah's protective care. Having established the general protection from all evil in creation, the surah now becomes specific. Allah moves from the universal to the particular, guiding us to understand specific threats and how to seek refuge from them. This is the divine pedagogy, first the broad principle, then the detailed application. The second ayah introduces us to a specific form of evil, gasikin ida wakab, minus darkness, when it settles or intensifies. The word gasik comes from a root meaning deep, intense darkness, not merely the absence of light, but darkness that is thick, heavy, penetrating. It is the darkness that brings with it a sense of foreboding, of concealment, of hidden dangers. Ida wakab, minus when it settles, when it descends, when it penetrates deeply. This is not the gentle twilight of evening, but the profound darkness of deep night, when visibility is zero, when shadows merge into blackness, when what was clear becomes obscured. The scholars of tafsir have offered multiple interpretations of this phrase, each revealing a different dimension of truth. Some say it refers literally to the night, that time when dangerous animals emerge, when criminals operate under cover of darkness, when accidents are more likely to occur. The night has always held dangers for human beings. In the time of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, travel at night was perilous. Wild beasts hunted, bandits struck, and people were most vulnerable. But the wisdom of the Qur'an extends beyond the literal. Other scholars interpret Gasikin Ida Wakab as referring to the moon when it enters its dark phase, when it becomes completely concealed. Throughout human history, the lunar cycle has been associated with various phenomena. Tides change, certain illnesses worsen, and even human behavior can be affected. The full disappearance of the moon creates a particular kind of darkness that the ancients recognized and feared. Yet there is an even deeper meaning here. Darkness is not merely physical, it is psychological, spiritual, emotional. We speak of dark thoughts, dark times, and the dark night of the soul. When depression settles heavily upon a person, when anxiety penetrates deep into the heart, when confusion clouds the mind. This too is Gasikin Ida Wakab. This is darkness that settles, that takes residence, that does not easily lift. Think about those moments in your own life, when darkness seemed to descend, perhaps after a devastating loss, during a period of intense trial, in moments of spiritual crisis. The world may have been bright with sunlight, yet everything appeared dim. This internal darkness can be more terrifying than any physical night, because we cannot simply wait for dawn to dispel it. It requires divine intervention, divine light, divine mercy. Allah teaches us through this ayah that we need protection not only from external darkness, but from the darkness that settles within us. We need refuge from despair, from hopelessness, from the heavy weight of sadness that can crush the spirit. When we recite Wa min shari Gasikin Ida Wakab, we are asking Allah to protect us from every form of darkness, physical, psychological, and spiritual. There is also a mystical interpretation offered by some scholars. They suggest that Gasik refers to ignorance, that profound darkness of the mind that prevents understanding, that obscures truth, that leads people astray. When ignorance settles deeply into a heart, it becomes impervious to light. The person cannot see clearly, cannot distinguish truth from falsehood, cannot find their way. This darkness of ignorance is perhaps the most dangerous of all, for it prevents a person from even recognizing their need for guidance. Consider how comprehensive this protection is. In one brief phrase, Allah encompasses protection from the literal dangers of nighttime, the influences associated with lunar phases, the psychological torment of depression and anxiety, the spiritual crisis of feeling distant from Allah, the intellectual blindness of ignorance and confusion. This is the efficiency and eloquence of divine speech. Where we might need paragraphs to express these concepts, Allah conveys them in a handful of words, each laden with multiple meanings, each opening doors to understanding. The pairing of Gasik with Ida Wakab, when it settles, is also significant. Not all darkness settles. Some is passing, temporary, easily dispersed, but the darkness we seek refuge from is the kind that descends and stays, that digs in, that resists easy removal. It is the chronic rather than the acute, the persistent rather than the fleeting. Yet notice that even here, there is hope embedded in the structure of the ayah. We seek refuge from darkness when it settles, implying that with Allah's protection it need not settle at all, or if it has already settled, His power can lift it. The one who splits the dawn can certainly dispel any darkness, no matter how deep, no matter how long it has resided. As we reflect on this ayah, we are reminded that no darkness is permanent in the presence of divine light. Every night ends in dawn. Every difficulty contains within it the seed of ease. Every moment of obscurity can be illuminated by turning to the Lord of Al-Falaq, the one who specializes in breaking open darkness with light. The surah now takes us into a realm that many modern minds struggle to accept, yet which represents a very real dimension of harm and spiritual danger. We move from the darkness that descends to the darkness that is deliberately crafted and directed. This third specification of evil addresses what scholars unanimously agree refers to sihr, magic, sorcery, or harmful spiritual manipulation. The phrase an-nafathati fil-akad literally means those who blow on knots or those who spit on knots while whispering incantations. In the practice of harmful magic, practitioners would tie knots in cords or strings while blowing on them and reciting specific formulas, often invoking jinn or other spiritual entities to cause harm to their intended victim. This was a well-known practice in pre-Islamic Arabia and continues in various forms across different cultures to this day. But why would Allah include this in a surah meant for all times and all people? Is this not something primitive, something that sophisticated modern believers need not concern themselves with? This question itself reveals a dangerous blind spot in contemporary Muslim consciousness. But the reality of sihr is affirmed throughout the Qur'an and Sunnah. We read in Surah Al-Baqarah about the angels Harut and Marut, and how people learned from them that which causes separation between spouses. The Prophet Muhammad himself, peace and blessings be upon him, was affected by sihr at one point in his life, though Allah protected him and it was eventually nullified. To deny the reality of sihr is to deny explicit texts of revelation. However, the wisdom in seeking refuge from those who practice sihr goes deeper than simply acknowledging its existence. The blowing on knots represents any form of hidden insidious harm directed at another person through non-physical means. It is the harm that cannot be easily detected, that works in concealment, that manipulates unseen forces. In our contemporary context, this can extend to various forms of psychological manipulation, destructive gossip that ties people up in social knots, or the spreading of harmful ideas that bind minds in confusion. When someone deliberately works to destroy another's reputation through whispered rumors, are they not metaphorically blowing on knots? When propaganda is crafted to manipulate masses and bind them to false ideologies, is this not a form of the same evil? The knot is a powerful symbol. A knot binds, restricts, limits freedom of movement. When someone practices harmful magic, they seek to tie up their victims' affairs, to bind their sustenance, to restrict their relationships, to limit their success, to constrain their happiness. These knots can manifest as unexplained obstacles, persistent problems, or a general sense of being stuck despite one's best efforts. But here is the profound hope contained in this ayah. We seek refuge in the one who can untie every knot. No matter how complex the binding, no matter how many knots have been tied, no matter how powerful the one who tied them might, Allah's power to release is absolute. The same Lord who splits the dawn, who brings forth life from seeds, who opens wombs, he can certainly open any knot that binds his servant. The scholars that the use of the feminine plural an-nafathat mide Allahs, those female blowers, is significant. Historically, women were more commonly associated with these practices, though men certainly engaged in them as well. Some scholars suggest this grammatical choice indicates that the threat can come from those we might not suspect, from those who appear harmless or even nurturing. The danger is not always where we expect it. There is also a deeper spiritual dimension to consider. The greatest magician is Shaitan himself, who blows his whispers into human hearts, tying knots of doubt, fear, and desire that bind us from the path of truth. Every time we find ourselves inexplicably bound to a sin, unable to break free despite our intentions, is this not a knot that has been tied? Every addiction, every persistent negative pattern, every spiritual blockage can be understood as a form of spiritual knot requiring divine intervention to untie. The placement of this ayah between the darkness of night and the evil of envy is also instructive. Magic often works in darkness, in concealment, away from the light of truth and transparency, and magic is frequently motivated by envy, the desire to harm another because of what they possess or what they have achieved. When we recite Wa min sharri an-nafathati fil uqad, we are asking for comprehensive protection from all forms of hidden harm, from all attempts to bind and restrict us, from all manipulation of seen and unseen forces against us. We acknowledge that there are realms of existence and forms of harm beyond our complete understanding, and we place ourselves under the care of the one whose knowledge and power encompasses all realms. This ayah teaches us humility in the face of the unseen world. We do not need to understand every mechanism of harm, nor do we need to live in fear of these forces. We simply need to maintain our connection to Allah, to recite His words of protection, and to trust that His power supersedes all other powers. We arrive now at the final and perhaps most relevant specification of evil in Surah Al-Falaq, one that touches every human being regardless of time, place or circumstance. With this concluding ayah, Allah addresses one of the most destructive forces in human society, hasad or envy. This is the resentful desire for another person to lose a blessing they possess, coupled with the wish that one might have that blessing instead. It is perhaps the most honest acknowledgement in the Qur'an of a painful human reality, that sometimes the greatest threat to our well-being comes not from strangers or obvious enemies but from those who know us, who see our blessings, and who cannot bear for us to have what we have. The structure of this ayah is particularly striking. Hasad in the cursed, and envier when he envies. The repetition emphasizes the action of envy, not merely the state of being envious. Someone may have envious tendencies, but it is when they actively engage in envy, when they focus their resentful energy on another's blessings, that the real harm manifests. The scholars explain that hasad is among the first sins ever committed. It was hasad that led Iblis to refuse to prostrate to Adam. He could not bear that this creature of clay should be honored above him, a being of fire. It was hasad that led Cain to kill Abel, unable to tolerate that his brother's sacrifice was accepted while his was not. Throughout human history, hasad has destroyed relationships, torn apart families, ruined friendships, and even brought down nations. What makes hasad so dangerous is its subtlety and its universality. Unlike theft or violence, which require action and opportunity, hasad can occur purely in the heart. A person can sit across from you, smiling and congratulating you, while their heart burns with resentment at your success. They can praise you with their tongue while cursing you in their thoughts. This is why the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, warned us, beware of envy, for envy consumes good deeds just as fire consumes wood. But the harm of hasad extends beyond the internal corruption it causes in the envier's own heart. The scholars of Islam, drawing on both textual evidence and lived experience, affirm that the envy of an envier can actually cause real harm to the one envied. This is known as alan the thiel ayn, the evil ayn, though it is more accurately understood as the harmful effect of focused resentful attention. The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, confirmed this reality when he said, "The evil eye is real, and if anything were to overtake the divine decree, it would be the evil eye." He instructed us to say MashaAllah, what Allah wills, when we see something beautiful or praiseworthy, precisely to protect against the harmful effects of our own admiration potentially turning to envy, and to protect others from our inadvertent harmful gaze. This is not superstition or primitive belief. There is a profound spiritual reality here that modern materialism struggles to comprehend. Human beings are not merely physical bodies. We are spiritual entities with energy, intention and consciousness that can affect the world around us in ways that transcend physical causation. When someone focuses intense negative energy on another through envy, that energy can manifest as harm, unexplained illnesses, sudden misfortunes, the inexplicable loss of blessings. Think about your own life. Perhaps you have experienced the phenomenon of sharing good news with someone, only to find that afterwards things began to fall apart. Or you have witnessed someone's success draw the attention of enviers, followed by a series of obstacles and difficulties that seem to have no logical explanation. This is the reality that Allah acknowledges and from which He teaches us to seek protection. The mention of hazard as the final specification in Surah Al-Falaq is deeply significant. After mentioning the general evil of all creation, the specific evil of darkness, and the evil of those who practice harmful magic, Allah concludes with the evil of the envious heart. Why this order? Some scholars suggest it is because hazard often motivates the other forms of evil. It is the envious person who works under cover of darkness. It is the envious person who seeks out magicians to harm their object of envy. Hazard is the root, and other evils are its branches. Others note that hazard is mentioned last because it is the most common and therefore the most likely threat that believers will face. Not everyone will encounter a sorcerer, and physical darkness can be avoided with light. But envy surrounds us constantly, in our families, our workplaces, our communities, even in our places of worship, wherever human beings gather and compare themselves to one another. Hazard lurks. The phrase either hazard, mind the fierce also contains a mercy. It indicates that the harm of hazard is not constant or inevitable. It manifests specifically when the envier actively engages in the act of envy. This means that protection is possible, that the harm can be averted, that Allah's refuge is available precisely at the moment of danger. Before we transition to Surah An-Nas, let us pause and reflect on the completeness of protection that Surah Al-Falaq offers. We have journeyed through 5 ayat that encompass every conceivable form of harm, from the universal to the specific, from the external to the internal, from the physical to the spiritual. When the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, taught these surahs to his companions, he did not merely teach them as words to be memorized. He taught them as keys to divine protection, as shields to be raised, as fortresses to be entered. The Messenger of Allah would recite these surahs in specific ways, at specific times, understanding that their power was not merely in their meaning but in their application. It is reported in authentic hadith that the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, would recite Allah wal widatain menius these 2 surahs every night before sleeping. He would cup his hands together, recite the surahs while blowing gently into his palms, and then wipe his hands over as much of his body as he could reach, beginning with his head and face and moving downward. He would do this 3 times. This practice contains profound wisdom. By blowing into the hands, the breath carries the blessed words. By wiping over the body, we symbolically envelop ourselves in divine protection. The repetition 3 times emphasizes thoroughness and completeness. This was not mere ritual la diffuse, it was practical spirituality, a tangible means of seeking Allah's protection. Aisha, may Allah be pleased with her, the wife of the Prophet, reported that whenever he would go to bed, he would not sleep until he had done this. Even the Messenger of Allah, the most protected of all creation, the one accompanied by angels, the one receiving direct revelation, he did not consider himself above the need for this protection. How then can we, with all our weaknesses and vulnerabilities, neglect these surahs? The companions understood the power of these words through direct experience. There are numerous reports of believers who were protected from harm, who were cured of afflictions, who were saved from dangers through the recitation of these surahs. This is not folklore or legend. These are documented accounts from the most trustworthy generation of Muslims. But the protection offered by Surah Al-Falaq is not merely passive. It is not a magical talisman that works regardless of the state of the one seeking refuge. The effectiveness of these words is directly connected to the sincerity of the heart, the strength of faith, and the conscious awareness of what is being said. When we say Kala utu bara Al-Falaq, we must truly be seeking refuge, not merely reciting words out of habit but genuinely turning to Allah with full awareness of our need and His power. The tongue must echo what the heart feels. The words must be accompanied by conviction, by trust, by certainty in Allah's ability to protect. This is why the scholars emphasize the importance of understanding what we recite. When we comprehend that we are seeking refuge in the Lord who splits the darkness with light, who breaks open seeds to bring forth life, who has power over all creation, our hearts engage differently. The recitation transforms from mere sound to sincere supplication. Consider the structure of Surah Al-Falaq as a whole. It begins with seeking refuge in Allah through one of His attributes, the Lord of the daybreak. This establishes the foundation. We seek protection not from our own power but from His. Then it specifies the evils we seek protection from, moving from the general to the specific, teaching us comprehensiveness in our supplication. The surah does not tell us how to protect ourselves. It does not give us techniques or strategies or worldly methods. Instead, it directs us entirely toward Allah's, teaching us that true protection comes only from Him. This is the essence of Tawheed in action, absolute reliance on the one who has power over all things. Yet this does not mean we abandon practical precautions. Islam teaches a balanced approach. We lock our doors and also say Bismillah. We take medicine and also make dua. We seek refuge in Allah from harm and also avoid dangerous situations. The physical and spiritual work together, but ultimately we recognize that all power belongs to Allah alone. There is also a psychological dimension to understanding these protections. When a believer knows they have recited these surahs, when they trust in Allah's protection, they walk through life differently. Fear does not paralyze them. Anxiety about the evil eye does not consume them. Worry about hidden enemies does not dominate their thoughts. They have taken refuge in the Lord of the daybreak, and they rest in the certainty of His care.
This is not naivety or denial of reality. It is the opposite naivety. It is facing reality with the proper tools. Evil exists. Harm is real. Dangers surround us. But so does Allah's protection, and His protection is stronger than any harm. The one who truly seeks refuge in Allah becomes like a person who has entered an impregnable fortress. The storms may rage outside, but within there is safety and peace. The scholars also note that seeking refuge from these specific evils helps us recognize them when they approach. When we regularly recite Wa min shari gasikin ida wakab, we become more aware of the darkness that tries to settle in our hearts. When we say Wa min shari hasidin ida hasad, we become more conscious of the envy around us and within us. These surahs sharpen our spiritual perception, making us more alert to threats, while simultaneously protecting us from them. As we prepare now to move to Surah An-Nas, we carry with us the comprehensive protection of Al-Falaq. We have sought refuge from the evil in all creation, from the darkness that descends, from those who practice harmful arts, and from the envious heart. We are wrapped in divine protection, shielded by the words of Allah Himself. But our journey is not complete. Stay while Al-Falaq addresses external threats and their manifestations. An-Nas will take us deeper into the very core of spiritual warfare, into the battle that rages within the human breast, into the whispers that seek to corrupt from the inside. If Al-Falaq is the outer fortress wall, An-Nas is the inner citadel, the final line of defense for the believer's heart and faith. Let us enter this next dimension of protection with full consciousness, open hearts, and sincere need for Allah's refuge. We now turn to Surah An-Nas, the final surah of the Qur'an. the completion of divine revelation, and the companion to Al-Falaq in providing believers with comprehensive protection. Surah Al-Falaq addressed external evils and their manifestations. An-Nas focuses on the most insidious threat of all, nas, the whispers that infiltrate the human heart. Let us first hear the complete surah. Qul a'udhu birabbin-nas malikin-nas ilahin-nas min sharril waswasil khannas alladhi yuwaswisu fi sudurin-nas minal jinnati. Say, I seek refuge in the Lord of mankind, the sovereign of mankind, the God of mankind, from the evil of the retreating whisperer, who whispers into the hearts of mankind, from among the jinn and mankind. Notice immediately the difference in structure. Surah Al-Falaq mentions one attribute of Allah in Falaq, the Lord of the daybreak. Surah An-Nas begins by mentioning three distinct attributes, each building upon the other, each revealing a different dimension of Allah's relationship with humanity. The surah opens with the same command as Al-Falaq, Qul Balak, say. Again we are being commanded to make this personal, to speak these words ourselves, to actively seek refuge rather than passively hope for protection. But here the attribute we seek refuge in is specifically Rabb An-Nas, the Lord of mankind, not just the Lord of daybreak or the Lord of creation in general. Why this specification? Because the threat we are seeking protection from is uniquely targeted at human beings. The whisperer that will be mentioned focuses his efforts on humanity. Therefore we seek refuge in the one who is specifically the Lord, the Master, the Sustainer, the one who manages the affairs of mankind. The word Rabb carries multiple meanings: Lord, Master, Sustainer, Nurturer, the one who brings things to perfection. When we say Rabbinus, we acknowledge that Allah is the one who created humanity, who sustains us, who guides our development, who knows our nature intimately because He designed it. Who better to protect the human heart than the one who created it? This first attribute establishes ownership and care. Allah is not a distant deity unconcerned with human affairs. He is Rabb, Ninisimut with a sipimanuster, relation sipimati, involved in every aspect of our existence, managing our affairs with perfect wisdom, nurturing us toward our ultimate purpose. The second attribute adds another dimension. Malikinnas, the sovereign, the king, the ruler of mankind. Where Rabb emphasizes nurturing and sustenance, Malikin emphasizes authority and power. Allah is not merely our caretaker, He is our absolute sovereign, whose command is law, whose decree is inevitable, whose authority is unquestionable. Why mention both Rabb and Malik? Because comprehensive protection requires both nurturing care and absolute authority. We need a Lord who understands our needs and a king who has the power to fulfill them. We need a sustainer who cares for us, and a sovereign whose commands the entire universe obeys. The mention of kingship also reminds us of our position. We are subjects in Allah's kingdom. The whisperer may try to convince us that we are independent, that we can make our own rules, that we are accountable to no one. But by seeking refuge in the Malikin Asbal, Shikin Susan the Malikin Sus, our recognition of divine authority, our place in the cosmic hierarchy. In practical terms, this attribute teaches us that no matter how powerful the forces arrayed against us, no matter how strong the whispers, no matter how overwhelming the temptation, Allah's authority supersedes all. The Malik has absolute power, and when we seek refuge in His sovereignty, we place ourselves under the protection of the ultimate authority. The third attribute completes the foundation, Ilahinnas, the God of mankind, the one deserving of worship from all humanity. This is not merely a description of power or authority, but of worthy. Allah is not just the Lord who sustains us and the King who rules us. He is the Ilah, the only one deserving of our worship, our devotion, our complete allegiance. This threefold introduction is profound in its comprehensiveness. We seek refuge in Allah through His role as Rabb. Malikin is our creator and sustainer. His position as Malikin Sepibul. These attributes cover the totality of our relationship with Allah. He creates us, He rules us, and He deserves our worship. When we understand this, when we truly internalize these three realities, the whispers lose much of their power. How can we be led astray when we remember that our very existence depends on Allah, that His authority is absolute, and that He alone is worthy of our devotion? The repetition of mankind 3 times in these opening verses also emphasizes the focus. This protection is specifically for human beings, addressing our unique vulnerabilities. The jinn have their own challenges, the angels their own nature, but this surah speaks directly to the human condition, to the specific threats we face as beings caught between the material and spiritual worlds. Notice also the progression in these attributes, from Rabb to Malik to Ilah, from the personal relationship of Lord and created, to the political relationship of king and subject, to the spiritual relationship of God and worshipper. Every dimension of our existence is covered, every aspect of our relationship with the divine is invoked. This is not redundancy, this is comprehensive refuge seeking. We are calling upon Allah through every means, invoking every aspect of His relationship with us, ensuring that our refuge is complete. When we say these 3 attributes, we are wrapping ourselves in layer upon layer of divine protection, each attribute adding another shield, another fortification. The scholars note that while Al-Falaq mentions 1 attribute, An-Nas mentions 3, perhaps indicating that the threat addressed in An-Nas requires even stronger, more comprehensive protection. The whispers that corrupt from within are more dangerous than the evils that threaten from without. The internal enemy requires the strongest defense. As we proceed to understand the specific threat from which we seek protection, keep these 3 attributes in mind. We face the whisperer not as isolated, vulnerable individuals, but as those who have sought refuge in the Rabb, Malik and Ilah of all humanity, the one who has every right and every power to protect us. Having established the comprehensive foundation of refuge through 3 divine attributes, the surah now identifies the specific threat from which we seek protection. This enemy is unlike any other, nicer, subtle, persistent, and intimately familiar with human weakness. Here we encounter one of the most precise descriptions of Shaitan's method in the entire Qur'an, Al-Waswas al-Khannas, the whispering retreater. These 2 words contain volumes of meaning about how evil operates in the human heart. Al-Waswas comes from the root waswaza, which means to whisper, to suggest, to insinuate. It is not a loud declaration or an obvious command. It is a whisper, subtle, barely perceptible, easily dismissed yet strangely persistent. The whisper slips into consciousness like a thought that seems to be our own. It does not announce itself as external influence but masquerades as internal inclination. Think about how whispers work in physical reality. A whisper requires proximity mysus. The whisperer must be close to the ear. A whisper is intimate, almost conspiratorial. It suggests privacy, secrecy, something not meant for others to hear. This is precisely how Shaitan operates. He draws close to the heart, speaks as if sharing a secret, makes his suggestions feel personal and private. The grammatical form al-waswas is also significant. It is an intensive form, indicating one who whispers excessively, continuously, persistently. This is not someone who whispers once and leaves. This is one whose very nature is to whisper, who never stops his subtle suggestions, who is constantly at work trying to infiltrate the human heart. But Allah does not describe him merely as Al-Waswas. He adds a second crucial characteristic, Al-Qanas, the retreater, the one who withdraws, the one who slinks away, from the root Kansas, meaning to retreat, to withdraw, to slink back. This describes the whisperer's behavior when confronted with resistance. Here is the beautiful hope contained in this description. The whisperer is not invincible, he is Qanas. He retreats. When does he retreat? When the remembrance of Allah is invoked, when the believer becomes conscious of his presence, when divine light enters the heart. The moment you say, Ayudu Billah, I seek refuge in Allah, the whisperer must retreat. The moment you remember your Lord, the whispers must withdraw. This is why the Qur'an, the remembrance of Allah, is so powerful. It is not merely worship, it is spiritual warfare. Every Subhanallah, every Alhamdulillah, every Allahu Akbar drives back the whisperer. Every conscious moment of remembering Allah creates a barrier that the whispers cannot penetrate. Imagine the whisperer as one who approaches stealthily, whispers his poison, but the moment he is noticed, the moment light is turned on him, he must flee. He operates in darkness, in forgetfulness, in heedlessness. He cannot stand before conscious remembrance of the divine. The scholars describe this as a constant cycle. The whisperer approaches, suggests evil or doubt, then retreats when met with remembrance, only to return again when forgetfulness sets in. This is why consistency in dhikr is so crucial. It is not enough to remember Allah occasionally. We must maintain constant vigilance, for the whisperer is was, constantly active. Ibn Abbas, may Allah be pleased with him, explained that Shaitan sits at the heart of the son of Adam. When he forgets Allah and becomes heedless, the whisperer whispers. But when he remembers Allah and seeks refuge in him, the whisperer retreats and withdraws. This is the essential dynamic of spiritual struggle. Understanding how waswasa works is crucial for protecting ourselves. The whisper does not typically begin with major sins. It starts small, seemingly innocent, even logical. It plants a seed of doubt, a suggestion of desire, a justification for what we know is wrong. Perhaps that commandment does not really apply in your situation. It whispers, surely Allah will understand your special circumstances. This small sin will not really matter. You can repent later. Everyone else is doing it. You deserve this pleasure. Allah is testing you unfairly. The whispers are tailored to the individual. Shaitan has studied humanity for millennia. He knows our weaknesses, our triggers, our vulnerable points. To the prideful he whispers of superiority. To the insecure, he whispers of worthlessness. To the greedy, he whispers of scarcity. To the lustful he whispers of fulfillment. He is an expert manipulator, using our own psychology against us, but there is a pattern to recognize. The whisperer always seeks to create distance between the servant and Allah. It might do this through sin, making us feel too ashamed to turn to Allah, or through despair, making us feel we are beyond forgiveness, or through arrogance, making us feel we do not need Allah's guidance, or through distraction, keeping us so busy with worldly pursuits that we forget the spiritual dimension entirely. The Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, taught us that Shaitan flows through the human body, like blood flows through veins. This does not mean he possesses us, but rather that his influence is pervasive, internal, and constant. He is not an external enemy we can simply avoid. He is an internal threat that requires constant vigilance. Yet notice that Allah does not say we seek refuge from our Shaitan, the devil, but from Al-Waswas al-Khannas, the retreating whisperer. This choice of words focuses our attention on the method rather than the entity. It teaches us that the threat is in the whispering, in the subtle suggestions, and that the weakness of this threat is its need to retreat when confronted with truth. This empowers us. We are not helpless victims of an all-powerful evil force. We have been given the tools to make the whisperer retreat. Every time we remember Allah, we score a victory. Every time we resist a whisper, we weaken its influence. Every time we seek refuge, we are protected. The description Al-Waswas al-Khannas also implies that this enemy is a coward. He whispers in secret but cannot stand in the open. He suggests from hiding but flees when exposed. He thrives on our forgetfulness, but withers in our remembrance. Understanding this gives us courage. We face not an invincible foe but a retreating whisperer who must flee before the light of divine remembrance. The surah now reveals the precise location of this spiritual warfare, the exact target of the whisperer's campaign, and in doing so teaches us where we must focus our vigilance and protection. The phrase fi sudurinas, Immerse in the hearts of mankind, is perhaps one of the most personally relevant descriptions in the entire Qur'an. The word sudur is the plural of sadr, which literally means chest but metaphorically refers to the heart, not the physical organ, but the spiritual center of the human being, the seat of consciousness, emotion, intention, and faith. This is where the battle truly takes place. Not in external circumstances, not in physical spaces, but within the human heart. Every struggle you face, every temptation you resist, every doubt you overcome, these are all manifestations of what occurs in the sadra, in that inner sanctum where faith either flourishes or withers. The Qur'an consistently emphasizes the heart as the locus of human spiritual reality, the day when neither wealth nor children will benefit, except he who comes to Allah with a sound heart. 26:88, 89. The heart's soundness determines eternal destiny. It is in the heart that faith resides, that intentions form, that choices are made. Control the heart, and you control the entire human being. This is why Shaitan targets the heart specifically. He does not merely seek to corrupt our actions. Yes, actions can be corrected, sins can be repented from. His ultimate goal is to corrupt the heart itself, to plant disease within it, to make it inhospitable to faith. A corrupted heart produces corrupted actions naturally, inevitably, continuously. The Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, taught us, verily there is a piece of flesh in the body. If it is sound, the whole body is sound, and if it is corrupt, the whole body is corrupt. Indeed it is the heart. Everything emanates from the heart. Purify it and purity spreads to all aspects of life. Allow it to be corrupted, and corruption seeps into everything. Understanding that the whispers target the heart helps us recognize their operation. When you experience a sudden doubt about Allah's mercy, that is wazza in your heart. When you feel an inexplicable pull towards something forbidden, that is wazza in your heart. When you find yourself justifying what you know is wrong, that is wazza in your heart. When despair about your sins overwhelms you, that is wazza in your heart. The heart is described in Islamic spirituality as being like a polished mirror. When clean, it reflects divine truth clearly, but sins are like rust on this mirror, gradually obscuring the reflection. The whispers work to create this rust, to dim the mirror, to distort what the heart perceives, until truth appears as falsehood, and falsehood appears as truth. This is perhaps the whisperer's most dangerous accomplishment, not merely leading us to sin, but corrupting our very perception of right and wrong. When the heart becomes sufficiently diseased, a person no longer recognizes good as good or evil as evil. They become like those described in the Qur'an, whose hearts have been sealed, who cannot hear truth even when it is spoken clearly. But there is profound hope in understanding this mechanism. If the heart is the battlefield, then we know where to focus our defensive efforts. We do not need to control every circumstance in our lives, monitor every person we encounter, or manipulate every situation to avoid temptation. We need to guard our hearts, to keep them connected to Allah, to maintain their polish and purity. How do we guard the heart? Through the very practices taught by our religion. The 5 daily prayers are not merely rituals, they are regular cleansing of the heart. 5 times returning to the source of purity. 5 anchors throughout the day, preventing the heart from drifting. Recitation of the Qur'an is not just reading, it is allowing divine speech to enter the heart, to illuminate it, to strengthen it. Dhikr is not just repetition, it is fortifying the heart's defenses, creating an environment hostile to whispers. The scholars note that the heart has 2 doors, one facing toward Allah and divine truth, another facing toward worldly desires and lower impulses. Through which door we allow influences to enter determines the state of our hearts. The whispers try to close the door toward Allah and wedge open the door toward desires. Our task is to reverse this mess, to keep the door to Allah wide open through worship and remembrance, while guarding the door to base desires through discipline and consciousness. Consider your own experience. In moments of genuine connection to Allah, during a sincere prayer, while reciting Qur'an with presence, in the depths of a heartfelt dua, do the whispers have power? They retreat. The heart filled with divine remembrance has no room for waswas. It is when we disconnect, when we forget, when we fill our hearts with other concerns that the whispers find their opening. This is why the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, emphasized that hearts are between 2 fingers of our Rahman, the most merciful, turning them as he wills. We do not have ultimate control over our hearts. Allah does. Our job is to constantly ask him to keep our hearts firm upon his religion, to protect our hearts from deviation, to maintain the connection that keeps whispers at bay. The phrase "Fi Sudurinas" also reminds us of our shared humanity. These are not just your heart or my heart, but the hearts of mankind. Every human being faces this same internal battle. The Prophet faced it, the companions faced it, the righteous throughout history have faced it, and we face it today. Knowing this prevents despair. When you struggle with whispers, you are not uniquely weak or especially sinful. You are human, facing the universal human challenge. This universality also creates compassion. When we see others struggle with faith, when we witness someone being led astray, when we encounter those whose hearts have become diseased, we recognize that but for Allah's protection, we could be in the same state. There but for the grace of Allah go I becomes more than a saying, it becomes a lived reality that generates mercy for others rather than judgment. The location of the battle in the heart also means that victory is always possible. Unlike external enemies that might be too powerful for us to defeat physically, the battlefield of the heart is one where we always have Allah's aid if we seek it. No matter how persistent the whispers, no matter how diseased the heart has become, the door of repentance remains open, and divine mercy can restore what was corrupted. The surah concludes with a revelation that many find surprising, yet which contains crucial wisdom for understanding the complete nature of the threat we face. This final specification reveals that the source of waswas, of harmful whispers into human hearts, comes from 2 distinct origins, the jinn and human beings themselves. This dual source teaches us that the enemy is not singular, not one-dimensional, but multifaceted in ways that require comprehensive awareness. The mention of jinn first is logical, as Immerse, the primary whisperer, is himself from the jinn. The jinn are created beings made from smokeless fire, existing in a realm parallel to ours, capable of perceiving us while remaining largely imperceptible to us. They have free will, intelligence, and the ability to influence human affairs within the limits Allah has set. Shaitan and his followers from among the jinn dedicate themselves to leading humanity astray. They whisper doubts about faith, suggestions towards sin, justifications for disobedience. They work tirelessly, never sleeping, never tiring, constantly seeking entry points into human hearts. Their longevity, living for centuries, gives them vast experience in human psychology and weakness. They have observed countless humans across generations, learning what works, what manipulates, what corrupts. But the surah does not stop with the jinn, it adds wanas and mankind. This is the startling reality: human beings themselves can be sources of waza, whispering evil into the hearts of others. In fact, many scholars note that the human whisperers can be even more dangerous than the jinn ones, because they operate in the visible realm with human understanding, with social access, and often with the trust of those they seek to corrupt. Consider how this manifests. The friend who mocks your commitment to prayer, planting seeds of doubt about whether it is really necessary. The family member who suggests that certain Islamic guidelines are outdated or too strict for modern times. The colleague who whispers that everyone bends the rules, that a little dishonesty in business is normal, that you are being naive to maintain your integrity. The influencer on social media who makes sin appear glamorous and righteousness appear burdensome. These human whisperers might not even be conscious of their role. They might genuinely believe they are helping, offering advice, sharing perspective, yet they function as conduits for the same waza that Shaitan himself would whisper. They reinforce doubts, normalize sins, make deviation appear reasonable. This is why the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, emphasized the importance of righteous companionship. Our companions either elevate us toward Allah, or drag us towards spiritual destruction. The human shaitan media, the human devils, can take many forms. There are those who actively work to spread corruption, the drug dealer who introduces youth to addiction, the person who spreads pornography, the one who teaches others how to cheat or steal or lie. But there are also subtler forms: the parent who teaches their child to prioritize wealth over righteousness, the teacher who instills materialistic values, the spouse who gradually pulls their partner away from religious practice. Sometimes the most dangerous human whisperers are those closest to us, those we love and trust, whose words carry weight in our hearts. When someone we respect suggests that we are being too extreme in our faith, too rigid in our practice, that we should be more flexible and less concerned with details, these whispers can be more devastating than any doubt Shaitan himself could plant, because they come wrapped in human affection and apparent concern. The Qur'an warns us explicitly, O you who believe, indeed among your spouses and your children are enemies to you, so beware of them. 64:14. Not that they are inherently evil, but that they can become means through which we are pulled away from Allah, whether through excessive attachment or through their negative influence. The love we bear them can make us vulnerable to their whispers. This dual source of waza teaches us the need for comprehensive vigilance. It is not enough to seek protection from the unseen realm of jinn while ignoring the visible realm of human influence. We must guard against both. We must be selective about who we allow to speak into our hearts, whose opinions we value, whose company we keep, whose influence we accept. Yet this knowledge should not lead to paranoia or isolation. The purpose is not to suspect everyone or to withdraw from human interaction. Rather, it is to develop spiritual discernment, the ability to recognize waza, regardless of its source, to identify whispers that lead away from Allah, whether they come from jinn or human beings, and to reject them while accepting guidance that leads toward righteousness. The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, taught us a beautiful criterion: evaluate every whisper, every suggestion, every influence by whether it brings you closer to Allah or distances you from Him. This simple test cuts through all complexity. Does this thought, this advice, this friendship, this pursuit increase your faith or diminish it? Does it make worship easier or harder? Does it illuminate your path or cloud it? When we understand that both jinn and humans can be sources of harmful whispers, we understand why comprehensive refuge in Allah is necessary. We cannot protect ourselves through our own vigilance alone. Nah, the threats are too numerous, too varied, too persistent. Only by constantly seeking refuge in the Rab, Malik and Ilah of humanity can we hope to guard our hearts against all forms of waza. We have now completed our journey through both Surah Al-Falaq and Surah An-Nas, these twin fortresses of protection that Allah has gifted to the believers. Let us now pause and reflect deeply on what we have learned, on how these surahs integrate into our lives, and on the practical wisdom they offer for our daily spiritual struggle. These two surahs, though brief in length, contain within them a complete system of protection. They address every conceivable threat to the believer, from the external world and from the internal landscape, from visible enemies and invisible forces, from the physical realm and the spiritual dimension. Together they form a shield that, when properly utilized, renders the believer impervious to harm that could distance them from Allah. The beauty of these surahs lies not merely in their comprehensiveness but in their accessibility. They are short enough to be memorized by anyone, simple enough in language to be understood by all, yet profound enough to occupy the contemplation of scholars for a lifetime. A child can recite them, yet a sage continues to discover new depths within them. This is the miraculous nature of divine speech. Consider how the two surahs complement each other. Al-Falaq begins with seeking refuge in the Lord of the daybreak, invoking the imagery of light conquering darkness. It addresses tangible and mystical threats: Mars, the general evil in creation, the darkness of night, harmful magic, and destructive envy. These are things that affect us from outside, that approach us from the external world. An-Nas then takes us inward, addressing the whisperer who infiltrates the heart itself. It begins not with one attribute, but three: Mirba, Malik and Ilah, as if recognizing that the internal threat requires even stronger divine invocation. It identifies the enemy not by name but by method. Nas, the retreating whisperer, reveals that this whisper comes from both supernatural and human sources. Together they teach us that true protection requires both external and internal fortification. It is not enough to guard against outside threats while leaving our hearts vulnerable, nor can we focus solely on internal purity while ignoring the real dangers that surround us. The believer needs both shields, both surahs, both dimensions of protection. The Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, understood this perfectly. His practice of reciting these surahs every morning and evening was not superstition or ritual for its own sake. It was practical spirituality, beginning each day wrapped in divine protection, ending each day secured in divine refuge. The morning recitation prepared him for the day's trials. The evening recitation cleansed him from the day's exposures to evil and guarded him through the vulnerable hours of sleep. Imagine implementing this practice with full consciousness. Each morning, before facing the world with all its challenges and temptations, you consciously wrap yourself in these surahs. You acknowledge your vulnerability, you recognize the threats you will face, and you place yourself entirely under Allah's protection. You are not stepping into the day relying on your own strength, wisdom, or vigilance.
You are stepping out as one who has sought refuge in the Lord of the daybreak, in the Rab, Malik, and Ilah of humanity. Each evening, as you prepare for rest, you repeat this protection. You acknowledge that the day may have exposed you to evil influences, that whispers may have found entry points, that your spiritual defenses may have been weakened. Through reciting these surahs, you cleanse yourself, you renew your protection, you re-establish your connection with divine security. You do not sleep as one vulnerable and exposed, but as one sheltered in the refuge of Allah. The scholars emphasize that the effectiveness of these surahs is directly proportional to the presence of heart with which they are recited. Words spoken mechanically, without consciousness or conviction, offer limited protection.
But when recited with understanding, with sincerity, with genuine turning to Allah and true recognition of our need for Him, then their power becomes manifest. This is why we have spent these hours together, unpacking each word, exploring each concept, understanding each layer of meaning, not merely as an academic exercise, but as preparation for more powerful practice. When you now recite Qul A'udhu bi Rabbi Al-Falaq, you understand that you are seeking refuge in the one who splits open all darkness. When you say Min Shari Ma Khalaq, you comprehend the vastness of the protection you are requesting. When you recite Al-Waswas Al-Khannas, you recognize the specific enemy and his specific method. Knowledge transforms practice. Understanding deepens impact. Consciousness amplifies protection. These surahs work regardless, for they are divine words with inherent power. But their full potential is unlocked when the heart that recites them is present, aware, and sincerely seeking what they offer. There is also a communal dimension to consider. When a household makes these surahs part of their daily practice, the entire home becomes fortified. When parents teach their children not just to memorize, but to understand these protections, they gift them armor that will serve them throughout life. When a community collectively maintains this practice, they create an environment where evil struggles to take root. Think of these surahs as spiritual antibodies. Just as physical antibodies protect the body from disease, these divine words protect the soul from spiritual corruption. Just as we maintain physical health through regular hygiene and nutrition, we maintain spiritual health through regular recitation and reflection on these protective surahs. The timing of their revelation among the last surahs revealed to the Prophet Minor carries significance. As his mission was completing, as the message was being perfected, Allah ensured that Ummah had these tools of protection. It was as if to say, I have guided you to the truth, now here are the means to protect that guidance. I have illuminated your path, here are the shields against those who would seek to darken it. Thank you for resting with me and listening to these reminders from the Recitation. If you'd like to continue this journey of peace and reflection, please subscribe for future episodes. Together we can keep learning and finding calm through the words of Allah.